take a breath, 'cause the story's just beginning.
Gus Gowland, and I'm the writer of Pieces of String. I am an actor, writer. I trained at drama school in Scotland, the Royal Scottish Academy, and have been working as an actor for the past decade, and I started doing more and more writing in my spare time, putting on shows, and then decided to go to Goldsmiths University and did a master's degree in musical theatre writing, and half of my grade was writing a show which Pieces of String was, and so that's where I'm at now, basically. It had been something that has been knocking around in my head for years. When I was up in Scotland, I saw the last kind of 5 minutes of a documentary on Channel 4, and it was this really old guy, tubes up his nose, kind of very close to death, talking about the love of his life, and then the camera kind of panned left, and next to him was a guy, and that kind of took me by surprise, and it was basically about gay people during the Second World War, and in the army in the Second World War, and I just thought that's really interesting. I don't know anything about that, and I kind of, all of my experience of homosexuality in the Second World War always seemed to be about persecution, specifically like the Nazis persecuting with the pink triangle and things like that, and I hadn't heard about kind of just British or American soldiers and just, you know, kind of falling in love when they were at war, and I thought that was interesting. So it kind of stayed with me. I never saw the rest of the documentary. I did contact Channel 4 to try and get hold of it, and I couldn't. But it was something that was, you know, in the bottom drawer, like, oh, I'd like to explore that at some point. Yeah, and it bubbled around, and then when I came to have to write my final show at Goldsmiths, it was still there, and by kind of some beautiful moment of felicity and serendipity, the Goldsmiths Library had that documentary, so I was able to watch it in full, and decided that, like, that's what I wanted to do, and to tell this story.
The years of never being there, the constant silence, pushing you further away.
I think, not to say that I don't have a lot of love for musicals that are fun and frivolous, but I think the work that I like to do is work that looks at the human condition, and so yeah, I think it's important to deal with subjects that people really recognise, and, you know, I want to try and say something about those things in a way that hopefully is in some way interesting and possibly inspiring to some people, I don't know. But yeah, it's, for the work that I do, it's something that I think I'll continue to try and focus on kind of real things and real people. The main thing that I learnt there that helped was we did a lot of work on analysing shows that already exist and that are kind of renowned as classics, and also ones that are not renowned as classics, and looking at why they worked and why they didn't, and that was really useful to kind of really break apart shows, and also to be able to tell the difference between shows that I absolutely adored, but then when you looked into them, actually shouldn't work, and that was just as interesting as the ones that tick all the boxes and go. And I found, and so that was really useful. And also throughout the course we had to write a 10-minute musical, and then we had about 40 minutes at the end of the course to write, to use as we wanted, and I decided to write a kind of one-act short musical with that time. So just having to actually write pieces that had beginning, middle and ends was really helpful. Yeah, that was the main thing, I think, that I really gained from it. And the deadlines, and kind of being told you have to write something for now, and actors will need to have a script and a score in their hands, you know, is very useful otherwise. nothing gets done.
There are shadows all around.
It's not so much that something. One thing I learned that I wasn't taught was I learned that I had quite a strong, I think, I hope, sense of stagecraft that I think really benefited me in the writing. The course was quite academic, and so there were a lot of people on the course that had other careers and were doing it as a kind of academic pursuit, and there were a few people like me who was doing it as kind of career development, as kind of, because I wanted a career in writing musicals, and so some people had never written anything for the stage before at all, and so it was really interesting to watch them learn that process, and it was really gratifying for me because I'd been to drama school and because I had experience as an actor and I'd done a little bit of directing and writing to realise that I do have I think a kind of a good sense of what will work and what you can do on stage, and I think that is very useful and saves quite a lot of time in the writing because you're not writing things that are unviable for the stage.
Let's keep it simple, easy, routine.
With great difficulty. The way I do it is basically write myself into a corner and I go, oh, that's a great idea, and then afterwards go, oh, why did I do that? It's really difficult. The reason I did that is because I'd had this idea bubbling around for years about dealing with gay people during the Second World War, and I just couldn't make it work. I'd written one song that actually has snuck into Pieces of String as an accompaniment only, but that's it, and I'd written a scene that is nowhere near the show as it is now, but couldn't get very far with it. And then I started writing a play totally separately that was set in modern day and was about the fact that gay men couldn't give blood, and which I thought was outrageous, and I wanted to write something that commented on the fact that, you know, if you were a gay man you weren't allowed to donate blood even though blood is needed. And again I wrote a couple of scenes and got a bit stuck and didn't know what to do. And then when I realised that if I combined the two ideas then I had something to say, and so that's when I thought, oh, I'll put the war stuff with the modern stuff, and that's where that came from. And then it became a really fun kind of puzzle of mirroring things and trying to make comments without being too preachy, and I'm really fascinated in history and in the kind of circle of life, but of when you see things in family members that you recognise in yourself, and you find out, you know, I'm the only person in my family that acts or performs or writes, and so it seems a bit odd, and then you find out that a great uncle or something was on the musical or something like that. That isn't my history, but for example, and that's really nice, it kind of links you to something and helps you explain yourself a little bit more. So I find that really interesting, so that's why I wanted to do that. But it does become difficult because of the puzzle of it all.
You don't want them now. You don't want them now.
The original song was called Just a Piece of String. And this was before I had the concept of the pieces of string. I really liked the metaphor of people as pieces of string and getting knotted together and fraying and falling apart, so it was just lots of very cloying lyrics about that, basically. It wasn't a great song. I like the melody, I have to say, but the lyric was not great. And the scene was just an old guy, who I guess now would be Edward, sitting in his armchair, kind of delivering. It was basically a monologue about the love that he lost, which obviously doesn't exist in the show anymore, because the character at that age doesn't exist in the show anymore. But they've been really useful, and I go back to them quite a lot as to remind myself of of what I set out to do, and to make sure that through the various changes I don't lose sight of the heart of what I want to make, because that song and that monologue are kind of the heart of it, even though they don't work for the show as it is. You know, it's good to go back and to keep them, remind myself of what I was thinking when I first started writing it.
Dirty secrets laid out on the floor. Years of lies and
I did do some research. I went to the Imperial War Museum a lot, and they were really helpful because there is very little there, or nothing, in fact, about gay people in the Second World War. Just something I've come up a lot against. It's always the pink triangle and the kind of being lumped in with the persecution of the Jews, and there is very little about just kind of just gay people and gays in the military at that time. So I wrote to them, and they were really lovely, and they had a lot of stuff in their archive, which little treat to know is that you can go and view their archives at any point if you get in touch with them, which is amazing. So I was able to go and find these books, and also they gave me all the numbers so I could go to the British Library.